Dear friends, so the professor is ready, and I would like you to welcome Professor Daniela Herrera. She is a professor of political science and international relations at the University of Catania. Daniela, please welcome, and you may start.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, I would like to apologize for being a little bit late. You know that we are all working online, and we can do things as upon request. And I was asked to give just a very brief speech into another seminar, given that I am also vice coordinator of the PhD School in International Relations. Sorry about that. Okay, so happy to be here. The first time that I joined the Samara University International School, and it's a great pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this school, which I believe is an international law, if I'm not mistaken. So what I'm going to offer to you is a little brief perspective on international relations. So this is what I'm going to discuss with you. We're going to talk for 1 hour and a half or 2 hours, just to be sure. 2 hours?
2 hours.
2 hours, okay. So I am allowed to share my screen?
Yes, you are.
Okay, let me check, because I have prepared a presentation. Let me see. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is the PowerPoint presentation that I have prepared for you. So as I was telling you before, what I would like to talk with you is about how the internet contemporary global political system is shaped, and how different actors and institutions are acting, and the roles they play in the contemporary political system. It's just a way to understand how things are going on in this world, and which perspectives we may envisage, and what predictions we can do in a way. So I was telling you that I'm not an international lawyer, I'm an international relations scholar. So my perspective would be a little bit different, probably won't be based on international law, but at the same time, this perspective may be useful to you as well for complementing the international law perspective, and try to understand how law, norms, and practices can work together and can combine for ruling this world, and also ruling the problems that we are going to manage. As of course, as we can see very easily right now in this contemporary world, we are facing a global pandemic. So the COVID-19 is not only an health emergency, is also a global crisis which is affecting all states, all regions, and is requesting a set of responses on the part of states, not only for managing the health emergency, but also for taking care of social issues, of economic issues. And so even the vaccination process, which has started almost everywhere in the world, requires strong coordination on the part of states and international organizations, which I mean the World Health, the World Health Organization, or the United Nations, or the European Union, in order to work together and to make sure that the process can go and proceed smoothly and without any issue. So the point is how the contemporary global system is able to manage global crises and global emergencies, because it's exactly what we need as citizens of this world. We need our problems to be solved quite quickly, and the states and international organizations to be able to provide responses which can be efficient and able to solve problems. So this is just what we are going to see, nothing else, of course. So why I I decided to talk about the global political system because from a political perspective, of course, we also focus on not only on laws and norms, but we also focus on actors. And of course, we have states. But there are also some different actors. We are non-state actors. So I'm referring to international organizations, regional organizations, but of course, even to civil society, to economic actors, to the press, to the churches. So all non-state actors which are playing a role in global politics. And of course, we refer to rules, institutions, roles, all these things which are made by states and which are necessary for ruling relations among states, but also for identifying those responses to manage global problems. And then thirdly, we have the processes through which rules and decisions and policies are produced. So in a way, in other terms, we can say how decisions are taken by states. Yes, we can say that from an international law perspective, of course, decision-making process is quite rigid and fixed, but we know also very well that many rules are not written. There are several rules of the game. Many problems, many issues are solved through gentlemen's agreements or agreements among states which are not written. So this means that there is also a consistent part of global politics which is not made by international law. So this means that we also need to understand how actors may rule their relations and manage the problem management beyond international system in international law. Needless to say, I have prepared this presentation, so I'm going to present, but of course I'm ready to stop if you have any questions. I cannot see, since I'm shared my screen, I cannot see anything from the chat or cannot see if you are raising your hand, but please let me know if anyone would like to interact or would like to ask something or just make a comment or anything else, okay? Because this is more intended as, let's say, as a conversation rather than a real lecture, because I really look forward to interact with you. And I hope there will be also some Q&A at the end of this presentation. But please feel free to stop me or to ask me whatever and whenever you want. So what I would like to also to give is this long-term perspective. So just to say that since the end of the Second World War until today, we have seen several historical and political processes in the world we are living in. So we saw a bipolar system with two major superpowers, so the US and Soviet Union, but then we had at the end of the fall of the Berlin Wall, at the end of the Cold War, we saw a multipolar world in which there were several regions with different strengths and different capacities. But then we also see the hegemonic power, which is exerted by the US. So we see many different forms of a global political system. So we can say that the Second World War represents a very important event, but at the same time, there are also several other important events which have contributed to shape the current political system. And all these events have been absolutely essential and relevant for making things different. And we can also say that all these processes and all these events can be helpful for understanding the kind of political system that we are going to live in. For sure, at the end of the pandemic, there will be a different political system. Things will never be the same, everyone says. So what does it mean exactly? What does it mean that we are going to live in a different world? What is going to be different? What is going to be new? So things like these ones can also help us to understand what will change, and whether we will have a new hegemonic power, or whether there will be a different set of relations among states, or whether non-state actors will be more powerful, or any other things that we may observe in this system, of course. And just let me briefly underline what I mean as hegemony or leadership. We all know that there are some actors, some state actors which are exerting leadership. And of course, I told about the US, but the US is not the only leader in the global system. So we see Russia is a global power, is a big power, or China, or we also see other medium power like Turkey or Iran. So all these state actors may exert different kinds of leadership. When we talk about global leadership, we refer to something broader, let's say. So for sure, we need, so the global political system needs to have a leadership, because we have so many problems that need to be solved, and we need someone who can manage to solve. We also need someone who can manage to identify those practices and responses which may be helpful for solving problems. So when I talk about implementation and then agenda setting, I refer to the fact that the global political system has some specific problems, which may be the climate change or terrorism, lack of basic resources like water or oil and gas, or conflict resolution, so the presence of several conflicts, organized crime, the impact on corruption, and now the pandemic. So there are several, let's say, global problems. So the implementation and agenda setting are very close steps, because those problems are important for identifying those actors which may be the leaders, because it means that there are some states which may be more responsive. So just to ask you something, following your general perception and in facing the global pandemic, the COVID-19, do you think there are some states which are currently playing a leadership or not? Just let me know.
Of course, I think Russia and USA are playing a leadership role with them.
Mm-hmm. Why do you have this perception? What they are doing exactly just for this leadership?
Leadership is depend actually on situation. When there is situation, there mean we have what is called the leadership. Leadership cannot be according to Robert Keane, that leadership cannot be exist without a situation. And with our current situation, or with COVID-19, there is a lot of problem available with economy and such things. And Russia and USA are the most affected, because Russia are depend on oil and gas. Most of it is economy, and USA is depend on the trade balance in the worldwide, and that's the situation here. So when they have to play actually the leadership role in that. If they didn't, they will fail, and that actually what they are trying. And you can see from the news that USA is are trying to take the leadership in providing vaccine for this pandemic. That is my perspective.
Yes, thank you very much, Mohammed. Yes, absolutely. What you are saying makes sense. And yeah, so the resources, and so the use of resources, the rational use of resources is absolutely important in respect to the pandemic. And this will also make the difference in not only in respect to citizens. So of course, for each state, citizens are should be the first priority. So they should take care, each state, each political elite, let's say, should take care of their own citizens. But at the same time, and so the pandemic is also raising the something which we may label like a collective responsibility. So we know that the vaccine cannot be a national vaccine. So this is something which is which should be shared with other people in the world. So leadership may, in this specific case, may also mean something related to the ability to provide assistance also to other people, and this will make a difference in the future. I absolutely agree with you. Thanks. Is there any other comments on this?
Me.
Yes,
Well,
Leonardo.
I think that no one is leadership the world, because actually there is some struggles now in the world that is almost happened. And in the fight for the COVID, well, all the countries in the world was not prepared for that, no? Some countries, yes, have a lot of money, like the countries in the European Union, but actually it's very different. It's very hard to explain it, no? Because, for example, if you look Latin American countries and South Asia countries, almost all of them depend of the informal economy, no? And if we look, for example, in the fight for the vaccine, it's like Canada. Canada bought almost 3 times the vaccines of all the population. So they ensure to vaccine all the people like 3 times. And there is countries that they doesn't have the opportunity to get the vaccine, no? Like African countries, South Asia countries, and Latin American countries, no? So there is a problem in the leadership, no? Actually, I'm not sure that USA is leading the fight for the coronavirus, because actually we see now in the TV or in the news or in the media that they have a lot of problems, in political problems, in COVID problems. Also, I think that some countries in Europe has the same problem. So there is some struggles there, no? I think that China is an important actor uh, before COVID and after COVID, because actually in the last year was one of the only countries that grow in the economy due to the COVID. So maybe they are leadership in the COVID fighting, no? Obviously New Zealand, Australia, Israel, but it's hard to explain it.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much for your comment. Actually, it is true that one thing is that there are some countries which are demonstrating best practices, or to have a better performance, let's say, in the vaccination process or so on. So New Zealand, for example, or Israel are doing a great job for sure. But another thing is to have a leadership, which means that this is more than good practices or a better performance. And it is also true that sometimes, well, not sometimes, almost everywhere in respect to global problems, the leadership can make the difference. Sometimes the global citizenship needs to have a leader, because if you think, for example, to climate change, or environmental issues, there is no real leadership. And that's the problem, because nobody among big powers or among those states which are more capable, because they have more capabilities, are really willing to take the leadership. Well, for example, in the fight against terrorism, we see the US immediately responsive, immediately able to deploy lots of intelligence and resources. As in front of the pandemic, we see a different face of the US, or we see the rising or other states, as you also Mohammed was mentioning Russia. So it is true that leadership can be different. But at the same time, leadership can be relevant depending on the problem we need to face, because at the end, global politics is just not different than just resolution of the major problems that we are facing. Nothing different, nothing else. So this is why I'm using this slide that you see, because the agenda setting and what states are able to put into the agenda setting may be relevant and can make the difference in the coalition building. So depending on what we see today in the relations among states can be relevant for the coalitions of the future. So we will see whether the US or European states or Russia or Brazil or Argentina or other relevant states in the Latin American continent, or in African states like South Africa, for example, just to name few countries, because there are several countries, big medium powers. So we will see whether all these states will create different coalitions. But it is also important because different coalitions can be relevant for the macro decision, which is the implementation of the agenda setting. So in other words, we have a problem. Depending on how we perceive the problem and how we want to solve the problem, we work together, or we work separately, or we work in small groups, or we work in whatever forms we want to work. And depending on the kind of work we are doing, we will be able to take decisions, and decisions may be efficient or not. So I don't know whether you are following my rationale. So this is something that we can apply to any major global problem.
I have a question, if you don't mind, Professor. Can I speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. What do you think about the theory that says that this is something planned already from some governments to control the world? What do you think about the fears of increment in population in the world, and the thoughts that they want to reduce the numbers of people? Haven't you think about this theory, or have you read about something like this?
Thank you very much for your question. Well, actually, it's impossible not to have an opinion about that, or not to read something about that, because it's a so-called conspiracy, right? Or at least this is the word which is the label.
Yes, exactly. First to create a disease, and then find the cure for this disease to get more profit, something like this.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the first time that conspiracy theories are become popular, let's say, because even when, if you remember, when the world has to face Al-Qaeda or ISIS, the same conspiracy theory started to arise again, and saying that ISIS or Al-Qaeda first and ISIS after were simply created by Israel for building the threat that there was a terrorist monster able to kill everyone in Europe.
Well, it was a fact that it was created by America, because at that time Russia was interfering in Afghanistan, and America wanted to stop Russia from expanding, so they were supporting the Afghanis. That's a fact. And then
Yes.
after the Russian left Afghanistan, America still was aiding Al-Qaeda. So it was a fact. It was not a conspiracy theory. It was a fact, actually.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is that conspiracy theories can be more reliable as soon as they have empirical facts. So when some empirical facts can be, or empirical evidences can be identified and then can be demonstrated, that of course they can be useful for demonstrating that this is not a conspiracy, because a conspiracy is something that cannot be proved with evidences. So right now, of course, the conspiracy theory applied to the pandemic is very fascinating because it's very rational. I mean, looking at what is happening in China. So we can say that, of course, they have been very good in applying lockdown. So the people have been literally closed at home. Well, we have the same experience in Europe, for example. So lockdown in Europe, but people, of course, try to escape and try to and violated the rule all the time. Even now, after 1 year, they are still violating lockdown because people don't want to stay at home. So we can say that China has been very good, but then we see that they have been able to defeat, let's say, the virus, or apparently to defeat. They have some figures, but very few figures, of course, compared to the rest of the world. So the theory is very fascinating. The fact that the World Health Organization mission has been blocked for several months. You know that there's a mission sent by the UN in order to investigate what happened exactly in the country, in China. And this mission has been blocked, but only now this mission has been allowed to enter the country. And one of the researchers, if I'm not mistaken, has been blocked in Singapore because of COVID-19. He tested positive. And then also in consideration that the Chinese economy is growing more and more. Yes, of course, this is fascinating. But of course, we still don't have any evidences.
So if the picture is still gloomy and we don't know where the source of this virus, was it man created or was it by nature, then we definitely we don't trust the vaccines that's available now, because to issue a vaccine it should be tested for a long time. It cannot be done in 1 year or 2 years. It needs several years to be tested and to see the effects of it on people, you know. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it is true. At first sight, it looked that this vaccine was built and created in a very short period of time, whereas usually a vaccine takes a lot of time to be created. But at the same time, now the level of the high quality of those private companies which have been involved in the research, also the fact that there are at least 3 or 4, more than 5 vaccines available, and they have been already tested in many countries. So in Italy, for example, there are already 1 million people which have received vaccine. So the same in several countries, or I know that in Russia also the vaccination has started. The same in Israel. I don't know which is your country because I can only see Islam.
Yeah, I'm from Egypt.
Egypt, okay. Anything that the vaccination started there?
I think they are importing, but I don't know from which country they're importing the vaccines.
Okay. Well, as far as I know, the vaccines which have been approved and authorized only by the international organizations can be tested on people. Well, so far, the test has been quite successful. But at the same time, we have because a lockdown is the most efficient measure, but it cannot be used forever because otherwise you know, die. So we don't have any other option than testing the vaccine.
So would you accept to take a vaccine if this is the case?
Yes. Yes, I think so. Yeah. Let me give another example. Before the pandemic, I used to travel almost every month because it was a great pleasure for me to be. I was invited in several countries. So I was also invited in several other countries, in some African countries, for example, and I had to take mandatory vaccine like yellow fever and something else. And I already done the vaccine, and everything always worked very well. So I believe that we can give the research a chance, at least considering that we are in the middle of the pandemic, so there are no other option. Of course, no vaccination is mandatory, so it's we are free to refuse if we don't want to. I think it's the same in several countries. But for example, I will do for sure. You are skeptical.
As for me, I don't trust this theory, because I think it's all made up, the coronavirus, because recently, also a few years ago, we had several viruses, if you remember.
Yes.
Something came in from UK related to cows or something like this, and something also fever of I think pigs or something like this. And it was proved that it was a way to gain money by issuing some vaccines for these diseases. So I think the picture is still gloomy, and we don't know what's going on. So
yeah. What do you think the states can do in order to try to mitigate the effects of the pandemic? Other than
sorry, excuse me again. I didn't hear you.
What do you think states can do in order to mitigate the effects of the pandemic?
What we can do? What? Your voice was breaking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think your microphone. You have two microphones on. You cannot hear. What do you think states can do?
Rates?
States.
What I think states what?
Can do for solving the problem of the pandemic.
For the coronavirus?
Yes.
I think it's the statistics says that lots of people are recovering without even taking any vaccines or anything like this. So I think if it's only targeting old people or people who have low immune system. The theory is to get rid of some people because the lack of resources, as because the people are increasing in the universe, and so they want to get rid of the unwanted people. As you can see in Italy, when it started, they were refusing to help to put the oxygen to the old people. They only was risking young people. So I think we have to wait. I'm not sure what can be done now, but as per the statistics says that lots of people are recovering already.
Yeah. But at the same time, lots of people are still getting infected every day. Yeah, for example, in Italy, we have about 12,000 people new infections every day, which are quite a lot. We also have about 400 people dead every day. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the solution, but we need to go ahead with the vaccination for now and see whether this may be helpful in lowering the numbers of infections. because
And also there are several countries who are issuing these vaccines. Which one would you trust? Which one do you think it will be effective? Because every country wanted to make money.
of course,
Germany, America, Russia, all these countries, they claim that they have the vaccine. Well, which one do you think it's effective? Which one you think it might be harmful to people? We don't know the side effects after 5 years or after 10 years. What will happen to these people after taking these vaccines? We don't know what's in these vaccines. As I told you, the vaccines that should be tested for a long time. It needs 5 years at least to get results. To make sure that these vaccines are actually effective, it needs at least 5 years. It cannot be done in 1 or 2 years, because you don't know what side effects can happen. If you read in the history, it happened before, and they gave people something, and in America, I think, and lots of women had some abortion, and some women had miscarriage or defected children born. So you never know. You never know.
Yeah, of course, there are side effects in all cases, in all vaccines, but at the same time, all these vaccines which are now tested are those ones which have been authorized and approved by international institutions, international health institutions. The fact that they will be produced and they will be sold to countries or governments because they need to be tested is another thing. It's a question of money, needless to say. But at the same time, it is also something that everybody in the world needs. So I think there is a room for everybody, all companies, to make money. Unfortunately, this is something that everybody needs in the world. So thank you for this nice conversation. As you have seen, as soon as when it comes to global issues and leadership in the respect to global issues, things may start to be more intriguing and more interesting because there are many things that can be done and many actors in this global system. And so it's not easy to solve and manage global problems. And so this is why when we have new coalitions which are going to apply their decisions to the problems, the solutions may be unexpected, and that we may also have unexpected consequences. And this may have an impact on in the long term. So this is why I'm telling you, nobody knows the kind of world that we will live in after the pandemic. Just to give you an example, let's say an historical example of implementation that started at the end of the Second World War, which continued until the Cold War, is for sure the fact that the US leadership started to increase, but then of course the Soviet Union leadership increased as well. So there was this bipolar world, and also the United Nations started to be the most important international organization, and not only an organization, but also a way to, let's say, a different conception of on how to solve problems. The fact that for the first time, states realized that it was important to cooperate and to work together for solving particular major problems. While as for the economic issues, were those ones in which cooperation worked much more easily. So when it came to conflict resolution or military issues or anything related to sovereignty, states are very reluctant. When it comes to economic issues, cooperation is much easier because as your friend said before, all the governments want to make money. So in the international economic regimes, it was much easier, and it is still now today much easier to cooperate. And then, of course, we had the non-alignment trends. Not all parts of the world were together with the US or together with the Soviet Union, because there were also different regions which were coming out from decolonization, and there were newborn states, newborn political regimes, and they were trying to solve their problems, but also to be a little bit more independent from Soviet Union or the US. But then with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the rising of the new power, Russia, that is to say Russia, and the new political regimes in the post-Soviet area, and so all these countries that we know very well, so the Eastern European countries, but then the Baltic states, and then Ukraine, and then the Southern Caucasus and Central Asia. So we have all these states which are today very important for political reasons, for economic reasons, for strategic reasons, because they are placed in a very strategic area. So this is what I was meaning as a change in leadership, a change in coalition, and how these things may have an impact on the way through which the global political system changes.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the previous slide, if you can come back to
Which
the
one?
previous. Yes, of course. So, change in leadership is very difficult things to be happen, actually. Edgar, China, and Hofstede and others people, since maybe since War II, they are trying to develop such theory that able to solve this ability to organization, any organization, whatever it is, political or organizational work in the NGO or profitable company or anything like this, are trying to do what is called, a unique, iconic or unique model for change leadership, so that it can overcome any crisis that company going to face within a period of time, of course. So since the leadership, as I told before, that it is depend on the situation, they are focusing on the leadership. But the question is how you can implement the leadership, the model of the change leadership in the organizations. And I think it's a very difficult thing to do. And from my perspective, some people are trying to make what is called gamification of this method, because change, the leadership itself is a one member of the organization, and he's trying to transfer his vision or whatever he has in his mind to other people in the company, so or in the organization. That is very difficult things to be happen. And also, changing an organization, it coming from it can be from top to bottom or bottom for top. These scenarios taken to, multiple people have made a model in this, and the implementation itself is very difficult. So we can come back to the initial point, how we can implement the change in the organization and make it in the whole country. An example in COVID-19, you have to convince people. This is a country, population, communities, to take the vaccine. And in example, in Italy, people, try to confront the change there, and they did not obey the government for the procedure requirement for avoiding the problem. Anyhow, I think I talked too long. If you can answer the question is of how you can implement, what is the best model for implement the change of leadership.
Well, this is a very difficult question. Thank you very much, but very, very difficult. I'm not sure I can answer the question because, well, first of all, it depends on what kind of change we are discussing about. What kind of change can be implemented, and are we sure that this change is legitimated enough to be implemented? Because if I can try to answer your question is that any change can be actually implemented only if there's a willingness to do that change. So if there is a sort of top-down legitimation, because yes, you told about people and you told about the bottom-up legitimation. So there are plenty of examples of changes which are produced by the bottom, so NGOs or movements. So before the pandemic, for example, we saw that there were several protest movements almost everywhere in all regions of the world, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Hong Kong, in Latin American countries, and so on. So there are lots of changes which are required from the bottom. But at the same time, we see that there's a lot of changes also required by the top down. So the problem whether any of this change can be successful is the source of legitimation. Who is legitimating such change? Because if there is a high level of legitimation, this means a high level of request. And so this means that maybe the change can be more, there are more, how can I say, chances that the change will be accepted and respected. So let me give another example. You see that the change in the environmental issue policies can be very hardly accepted because nobody agree on the fact that we need to apply restrictions or to apply reductions or reduce our all economic production, and the sustainability is very expensive and so on. So this change, which is necessary and which is claimed quite a lot by the bottom, because there are, before the pandemic, once again, there was this request made by the environmental movements. And it is clear to everyone that a change is needed, but nobody wants from the top to apply or to promote. So that's the problem. So what I would like to say, I'm not sure whether everything is clear, but what I would like to say is that all changes can be good. All changes may be necessary. All changes may be perceived as good and necessary. But the real difference is made by the legitimation. Who is claiming for that change? The fact that it's changed by millions of people everywhere in the world may not be enough. That's a problem.
Yeah, it's, for example, in the case of the United States, we don't see that practically all the international system that we have is thanks for them, because they legitimized the international system, but now they don't know what to do. Now they don't want the leadership. And I think that any country in the world wants the leadership, no? Everybody says that it's going to be China. Yes, maybe it will be China, but China needs something important, that is that question that the USA have, no? They have legitimacy in all the world, with the culture, with the international system, with the international organizations, the UN, and the other institutes that helps to control the world. And China doesn't have it. China is only hegemony in the region with the South Asia countries, and it's all. And yes, they are the hegemony in the economic and import and export things, but actually they don't have the hegemony in so many aspects that they need, like the USA have. And that's the problem, I think.
Yeah, indeed, legitimacy is one of the key words. So this is why I was stressing, and I thank you for raising the point. So legitimacy and leadership are very much related and strongly related. And in the middle, I would also say that legitimacy is very, very much related to civil society and to non-state actors, to let's say, the non-governmental world, because many changes have been requested by them, by organizations which are not states, and some of them have been successful, but then when it comes to legitimacy, that's the problem. States are much more powerful. Yeah. Anything else on that? All right. So just to give you an idea of the kind of change which was ruling during the Cold War, this is just an example of the rules of the game. Probably you have already heard and studied about these rules of the game, which were absolutely relevant for making the world during the Cold War not peaceful, because the Cold War was not a peaceful period, not at all, but it was they were essential for avoiding any military escalation or any nuclear escalation. So I'm not going to see in detail these rules, because what is important for me is to understand how things were working before, during the Cold War, for understanding what is going on today. So what is, I just would like to stress the fact that nuclear deterrence was very, very important, which was at the same time based on asymmetric warfare. And that's also something that we continue to see today. And so asymmetric warfare continues to be an important factor and variable which has an impact on leadership for sure, and on the relations among states. And then also the last one, the fact that US and the Soviet Union managed to solve all crises without third-party intervention. But at the same time, we don't have to forget number three, because the US and the Soviet Union avoided to fight each other, but many of the conflicts which were arising during the Cold War were used to continue at the end of the Cold War, or at the end, or although they were closed, some implications continue to be quite strong even after the end of the Cold War. So why I'm stressing these rules of the game? First of all, because they were not written. They were something we can define the gentleman's agreement, and they were powerful enough to rule the relations between Soviet Union and the US for a very long period of time. So there are some practices, some unwritten norms, rules, which may be powerful enough. And many things that we know, or many things that we see happening in the world today, are not written. So not everything can be explained with written norms or practices, because many things are happening exactly as rules of the game. So this is why I'm stressing the relevance of institutions. When I talk about institutions, I refer to those items which are important for ruling relations among states. And so for sure, we have international law, because international law is so far the most important institution for producing norms and rules, but also diplomacy. And then I'm afraid war is an institution, because even according to international law, war is a tool that states always have at their disposal for solving conflicts. Although we know very well that with the UN, these idea of collective security started to be important. So collective security means that war can always be used, but war is a last resort. So it is much better to try other let's say other tools before diplomatic, political, strategic tools, and then we leave to the war just as the last resort, only if it's not necessary to use any other issue. And what I would like to clarify is why the United Nations continue to be relevant today. Or actually, there's another question I have for you. I would like to know what is your perception of the United Nations today, particularly managing crises like terrorism or the COVID-19 or migration. Let's not forget migration, which is a global issue. And so is the United Nations and its agencies still able to manage these issues? So is the United Nations still able to be a place in which states can cooperate and find any solution? What's your perception?
There is a theory says that also United Nations is a way of spying on countries. They are actually working in some countries to get information about these countries. So, for example, in Egypt, in my country, there are some information which is restricted to be given to the United Nations, even if they wanted to get some numbers or some facts about some social thing in Egypt, for example. If they want to know how many women in the villages who are facing literacy, they cannot read or write, because my brother is working in the United Nations. So he says that the government is not allowing everything to be given to the United Nations. Because there is a strong belief that this information is leaked to some other countries. So, but we at the same time we cannot deny the fact that they are helping, and also the amount of aid is dependent on the economic situation of the United States. So, if the United States is facing economic issues, they will reduce the funds provided to these countries. Because my brother is working in the immigration, as you mentioned, is supporting migrants, illegal migrants, to go back to their countries, and the United Nations is helping them to start businesses or to get some sort of income in their countries without the use of illegal immigration. So again, it's dependent on the economic situation of the United States. If the United States is doing well, they will provide funds. If not, they will cut down the funds. But at the end, again, they are a way of maintaining peace, because of course we cannot deny their presence in the Middle East, in some countries where there is conflicts. So, but again, there is a hidden face which we are not, which we're not sure if this information or if their presence in these countries actually for the for a goodwill or for something else. So that's my perspective.
Okay, thanks. Is there any other opinion on the European, on the United Nations?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, of course.
All right. Yeah, I just want to say a few things about the United Nations.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the establishment of the United Nations itself, right, from the League of Nations, it was basically, I think, in my opinion, a political tool that was initiated by the countries that had won the First World War to like drive their own agendas onto the other nations. But of course, we understand that as it evolved, the United Nations, it started incorporating the interests of all other nations as well. So the current situation, as I see it, with the United Nations is basically a tool, right, that the bigger nations are using to drive their own agenda at the expense of the interests of the smaller nations. The United Nations, if you look at the Security Council itself, it's quite a non-representative, right? We only have the major political players that participate in the decisions of the Security Council. Smaller states, right? Smaller states in Africa or in Asia, they don't have any say whatsoever in the decisions of the Security Council. So we find that most of the decisions that are taken at the Security Council are there only to promote the interests of the bigger nations. Um, and when we talk of the interests of the bigger nations, what you're basically talking about is the interests of corporations, right? I was listening to Noam Chomsky the other day, and he was talking of the aspect of capitalist democracy, and he was saying there's nothing called capitalist democracy. It's an oxymoron. At the end of the day, you would find that in these countries that call themselves democratic, they are not democratic. They are basically powerhouses of capitalist corporations. So at the end of the day, you'll find out that the United Nations is more or less representing the interests of corporations, and at the expense of the smaller states.
Yeah, it is true that this is one of the most important complaints today, of the fact that there's a still little representation, and the smaller states, but I will also say the newborn states in the 60s and 70s, after the decolonization process, they started to be more demanding within the General Assembly, but then the Security Council was, of course, the most important body, because it was the one which was taking decisions, and which is still today taking decisions. And then, of course, the representation is not really emphasized there. So just to be clear, in this PowerPoint presentation, which I have already sent to Ekaterina, so it will be at your own disposal. So given that I did not know about your specific backgrounds, I have prepared some slides which may be useful to you. So just to remind that some basic facts about international organizations, and on the fact that we are talking about the most important universal organization, which was created.
Sorry, I have a question about the previous slide. I was unable to ask it because
Yes.
some people was regarding international organization. They are working actually most of time with government, and for that reason, they always trying to make their influence on the policy makers, and for that also they want to do business in other countries because they are international, and for that reason also they're trying to make a footprint in other countries. So sometimes my point I'm trying to reach is some people are trying to make such a simulation game that trying to make the picture more clear about how the international organizations, whether it is NGO, also can affect for the government's policy making decisions. And so how can the international organization affect the government policy regarding the international decision? Example, making conflict with other country. Taking an example now, there is a problem between Sudan and Ethiopia coming up, and maybe there will be a war soon. We don't know. And another thing that went between Qatar and Middle East, between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, there is peacemaking here there, and Azerbaijan, there is a problems has been solved. I think before 2 months ago. This all problem has been came because there is some people, private business trying to influence governments. If there is the ability that we can bring this together, this idea together between the international organization and government making decisions, that is my question.
It is another very difficult question, because Well, the first thing I would like to say is that our international organizations are usually intergovernmental organizations, so they are made of states. So we can say that usually international organizations do what states allow them to do. So they are the results of interactions among states. So it depends on what states want to do. But at the same time, there is also another side of the coin, let's say, because the more states interact and cooperate within international organization, even struggling, even having conflicts among them, but even a conflict is an interaction among different states. The more they interact, the more they have an impact of these interactions on their own decisions, because they will start, this can be applied to any organization. So not only to international organizations, but even for an organization made of individuals, not states. So this organizational theory. So if we have different individuals arriving into an organization with different views, different backgrounds, different approaches, but they start to interact, they can start even agreeing, or they can start even having conflict or struggling. At the end, necessarily, they change a little bit their initial approaches and ideas, or at least their ideas, approaches, backgrounds will definitely be not the same as when they started. So that's the same we apply to states. If we look at how the UN started and how the UN performed during the Cold War, and how the UN is performing today in respect to migration, in respect to the COVID-19, we see big differences. And we see big differences even in the state's performances, because the performances, the interactions which were existing in the Security Council before, during the Cold War, and the ones which exist today are very, very much different. So although states are not very willing to change, they are not very willing to compromise, at the end, they socialize what they're willing or not. Socialization is a process that applies to states anyway. So at the end, there will be various degrees of socialization, but all states which are working together and working within international organizations are having this impact, which means that sometimes they suffer this impact, but definitely they will have this impact. And did I reply to your question, Mohammed?
Yes, thank you very much.
Welcome. So I was telling you before that I have prepared these slides for you, and please don't forget that this organization was created on that date, 1945, which means at the end of the Second World War, with those states which were the winners. And also don't forget that, because I also teach global civil society, I'm a specialist on NGOs, so I always study the impact of NGOs. And 42 NGOs were invited when the UN was created, because the American leadership in that period wanted, after the failure of the League of Nations, wanted to legitimize the UN from the bottom. So they invited so many people. But please don't forget that the UN, two main things. The UN was built on the need to manage this issues, security, first of all, peace and security to the rest of the world, defense. So there was a dream of having a unique UN army, which of course was not never created, as we know very well. So any peacekeeping operation is made of national military personnel sent by states. And then social and economic problems. And don't forget that the voting procedure within the Security Council is still the same until since the end of the Second World War. And that was the main aims for which the UN was created. And also don't forget these three men were the main interlocutors and the main, the most important political figures in that period, and they contributed to shape the Cold War period and to shape also those ones which will be in the future, which will be in that period the rules of the game. And this is something which, of course, you may know very well. But just to refresh, if you're not, or you want just to refresh, you can use the slides I have prepared just for remembering that UN system is a huge system. So my question, I don't know whether you have, yeah, so you will see this one and this one. So you have now the idea of this huge, this giant, which also very expensive, because you see that there are thousands of people working for the UN and UN bodies, and there are also many buildings, many headquarters, which are placed and deployed everywhere in the world. So can we say that the UN today are still useful, or we need something else?
Okay, I can say that the UN will never work. Actually, never work. That's the beginning.
Never.
I have never work. I have three clear examples. The first one, Egypt, the war in Egypt. The United Nations sent the army to take the Suez Canal from the people from Egypt. They work for the interest of the Europeans over the people of Egypt. The second one, the war in Angola. The Union sent the South African army to fight in Angola to overtake the communist government. And what happened? Nobody can help us. Yes, Cuba sent the army to Angola and saved from the South African army. The third one, in Latin America, the overtaken of the Chile's government, democratic leader, and put a dictator in Chile. The United Nations never work, only work for the interest of the European people and United States. What happened in the Cold War? In Latin America with the United Nations, we have a lot of wars, a lot of guerrilla wars until the 20th century. The United Nations not work for any kind of subjects. Another example is the genocide in Rwanda. They don't help the people in Rwanda because they don't interest in Rwanda. In the 90s, the genocide, the United Nations don't work, only work for the European people and the United States. That's a fact. That's the reason Russia have their own union for the Eurasiatic Union, China have their own union, and the African people have their own union because the United Nations don't work, simply don't work. Even in Latin America, we know that the United Nations don't work for anything, Whatever kind of issue the world have, they don't work. In the COVID time, they just give us the actual information for the COVID. Why? Because of China. China put a lot of money. There is a lot of problems with China. They lie. They don't give the information about the issue. They don't give the information about what is happening actually. No, it's not working. We need another kind of organization from the free people, not from the Europeans. Mm-hmm. The world is not only Europe, not only America. There is another countries. And that's the reason I think United Nations don't work. And even in all this time, not working.
I have another example also for the failure of the United Nations. Okay. Let's remember what happened in Srebrenica in Bosnia, mm-hmm. when the United Nations interfered and declared part as a safe zone. and they requested the revolution to deliver their arms and to deliver their weapons as a step into peace. And actually, the Muslim resistance delivered their arms, and the United Nations allowed the Serbs to come into this city and kill everybody. They killed 8,000 Muslim people without any attack, without any thing, and they buried them in mass graves. And this was under the eyes of the United Nations. 8,000 innocent people, young people, men and boys, women were raped. This all happened under the eyes of the United Nations. So this happened in 1995. It's recently, it's not like 50 years ago.
Relatively
It's still
recent.
fresh. And this happened in Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, I see your point. So yeah,
Yeah.
you see that. Is there anything else?
Yes, I just want to second the opinions that have been raised by the two previous speakers.
Mhm.
Just briefly, I think, yeah, I agree with them that the United Nations is basically a toothless dog. I mean, we love talking about cooperation, talking about interregional cooperation among nations. It's a beautiful thing to say. It's a beautiful thing to be talking about all the time at meetings and so on. But when it comes to real issues that affect the general public, the United Nations comes short. I mean, it's very ineffective as far as addressing the plight and the concerns of the general people, right? Another example is that's recently is the invasion of the practical invasion of Libya by the United States. I mean, where was the United Nations there? You talk of the invasion of Iraq by the United Nations. Supposedly because it had weapons of mass destruction, which were later proved to be non-existent. It's so the United Nations just exists because we love the idea of nations coming together and cooperating in various spheres. But when it comes to actual solution to problems, it becomes very, very difficult to address those. It becomes toothless, so as to say.
Well, thank you. So you have very clear ideas on very clear opinion on the UN. So yeah, you basically are saying that the idea of cooperation is a nice idea, but when it comes to real politics, it starts to be very difficult to be applied and practiced. Whereas we see when it comes to global politics, so we see mainly states and leadership or different coalitions or different negotiations among member states and states.
I have actually, I don't agree with the previous speakers because we know in management, actually, we are looking for the effectiveness and the efficiency of the organizations. That is absolutely right. And also, we are looking for the purpose of the organization. UN did not build on uh, to manage the power of other countries. They are trying to help other countries to avoid war, and they are doing this best actually.
Mhm.
And they don't have army, they don't have money that they generated from themselves. They don't have organization that generate money from itself. They are dependent on other countries, the, uh, the founder countries like Russia and the USA and other countries that depend on that. So for that reason, we cannot, judge the work or the effectiveness of them according to if they can stop war or not, because they will not. They don't have a power to stop a war. If the founder of this organization uh, agree to stop such work, they will use their power. Russia will enter with their power, an example in Syria, and United States, the NATO enter in Libya. and United States was in Cuba, I think, and no, it wasn't Panama. That was in Panama, and such things. So we cannot, we cannot judge the effectiveness of such organization according to their ability to stop wars or make peace in such area. You know, every territory have their policy and, you know, local policy and such things. An example, in Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of things UN tried to stop it, but it was not easy.
So what's your clarification about what happened in Srebrenica in Bosnia?
You know,
what's the role of the United Nations after declaring this is a peace treaty and the resistance should give up their weapons? And after they did this as a goodwill, they allowed the Serbs to come and kill everybody. What do you think?
Why you ask? Yeah, but there, you know, there is Shishan, and you know, that's multiple things have in Russia. You know, now in China, if you go and think where Eastern, I forget the territory actually, but there's a lot of things.
Okay.
Well,
I cannot hear. If can you please switch your microphone as soon as you finish? Yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay. I think just one more point to bring out here. I think you cannot be self-contradictory and say that the United Nations was able to stop the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example, and then you go on and say that the United Nations, its function is not to stop war. I mean, that's self-contradictory. What I see happening with the United Nations when it comes to negotiations in terms of stopping war is that most of the times that the United Nations has managed to stop war crisis has been to the benefit of the bigger nations. And so you talk of the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example, it was basically to the benefit of the United States. So if the United Nations has to be effective, it has to be effective across the board, right? It has to be effective both to the powerful nations as well as to the smaller states, so that at the end of the day, we won't have the powerful nations just exercising authority over the smaller states. It has to be uniform across the board.
Okay, so let's say that, of course, there are different opinions, and for sure, you see that why and how teaching international relations for me is so exciting, because all the times we discuss quite a lot, and I'm very happy to see that there's a lot of discussion coming from this lecture, because of course there are different. It's normal that there are different views of what the UN are doing. It may be seen as a powerful organization. It may be seen as a failure. It may be seen as an instrument in the hands of big nations and so on. So there are different views that, of course, can be shared. So with different ideas. And so this is why I wanted to discuss with you, and these slides may be helpful for your own
and what's your own opinion, Doctor, about the United Nations role? Was it effective, actually, after what you heard about what happened during the last 50 years?
Well, my opinion. Can you please switch your microphone off? Okay, thanks. And then I will move to two more things I would like to tell you before the end of this class. My opinion is that the United Nations need a deep reform, because, of course, the Security Council cannot continue to go ahead with its actual composition. I see that in some cases the UN has been useful. In some cases, the UN was able to contain, let's say, some states' reaction and contributed to shape a little bit their own ideas. and also to stop, in some cases, not all the time, but in some cases, military escalation. In some other cases, we see big failures. That's, of course, something which cannot be denied. So my opinion is something in the middle, because I see some pros and cons of cooperation and some kinds of benefits as well. But also failure is very, unfortunately, very visible at the same time. So I just would like to talk with you about two more things before I end. So yeah, this is just pictures I have taken while in respectively in New York and Geneva. So we see the big, the visibility of the big the building. So the multilateral world which we are living in today, and this is a definition which may be considered, I just put here for your consideration. So the end of the Cold War started with different kinds of cooperation. According to some scholars, multilateral relations started to work. According to others, multilateralism was just a dream, something which would never been applied. But I would like to draw your attention towards two more things. The first one is globalization. Sorry, there's a typo here. The globalization, one said only. Not particularly on the fact that globalization has produced impact on economy, because we know it very well, and there's let's say a huge literature and some common understandings on what globalization did in the economy, but rather on the globalization of culture and identities. So this is probably something which you have already seen, which is the Clash of Civilization by Samuel Huntington. And he talks about a clash of civilization. He says that we have several civilizations, and at the end of the Cold War, civilization were going to replace ideologies. And this is what he says. So I would like to draw your attention on civilization and how civilization has changed toward, globalization. So how globalization is also changing today world. And also the second thing, and I would like to stop there, is the birth of different kinds of organization like the European Union, which according to some scholars, the European Union is a product of civilization, once again, globalization. So the first thing is that Huntington was supporting is that the clash of civilization is inevitable, because there are several differences among civilizations which are so deep that they cannot be managed. And so interactions among civilizations are growing and they cannot be stopped. And at the same time, let's say, the periphery of the system, which is the non-Western world, is becoming more stronger, and civilizations there are much stronger. So on the one hand, we see a clash of civilization. On the other, as a reaction to globalization, we see more integration process, like exactly what happened in the European Union. So since we have about 20 more minutes, Ekaterina, are you here? So I think
yes, I am here.
Just to know, so we are going to end in 20 minutes, right?
Approximately. It's
Okay.
up to you.
Okay, okay, because I see that the discussion is going very smoothly, and so I'm enjoying quite a lot. So first of all, I would like to have your opinions on whether a clash of civilization is actually important, or it was just Huntington's dream, let's say. Do you see any clash going on in the world?
Of course,
just
clash
a
is a
question. Just a question. I really need to understand what you mean by a clash of civilizations. Which civilizations are we talking about?
Let's say this one. Yeah, these ones. This is the civilization that that Huntington had in mind. So you see this more or less list. So basically, it talked about center and the periphery of the system. So the center, we usually say, is the Western world, and the non-Western is based in the periphery of the world. But the periphery is made of different civilizations, different continents, different regions. So Latin American, African, the Muslim world, and also the Southeast Asia, and so on. So this is the kind of civilizations he's talking about.
Well, in that case, then a clash is inevitable. I mean, it's a natural progression of things. There has to be a clash of civilization. I think the main question that we are supposed to look at is how the results of those clashes. And I think it's very interesting because as we see, I mean, we begin to observe a greater and greater integration of different types of civilization. You talk of the Western civilization and the African civilization. There's an integration of civilization. But what is important now is, as I see it, there is need to, for example, preserve sovereignty. A classical example is the European Union, for example. One of the main reasons for Brexit has been that there has been a loss of sovereignty of Britain in the European Union. So I think that integration of nations, it has to be done systematically so as to preserve, number one, sovereignty, and number two, cultural identity, because cultural identity is very important to every nation. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So you focus on integration.
I think a clash of civilization started when the Ottoman Empire was divided by the Americans and the UK and France. They started by making the Saudi Arabian prince make a revolution against the Turkey to get out of the under the umbrella of the Ottoman Empire, promising them that they will have their own kingdom, they will rule themselves. And after this actually happened, and revolution was successful, they didn't give them their own kingdom. They divided all the Ottoman Empire among these big countries, among the UK, among France, Italy. As you know from history, Italy was occupying Libya, France was occupying Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt. So, and under this colonization, they started to change the identity of these Arabic countries by making people erase the Arabic language as a first step. So, as you can see now, as a result, in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Algeria, most of the people, they can't speak Arabic properly. They speak most of a mix of French and Arabic. And of course, as you know, in France, they say that the Eiffel Tower was built from Algeria, from the iron of Algeria. So I think the clash of civilization started from this period. So by putting borders between these countries. That's it.
Okay, so you see that more or less you see that a clash is happening.
Okay, I can speak.
Of course.
Okay, see, regarding the clash and the globalization, is, you know, there are you know, there are two facets for the same coin, actually, you know, because, you know, when there is a clash, of course, there is a reason for that clash, and most of the time, this clash is going to be for one reason. Let others do what I want to do, and specifically by the way I wanted them to do it. And that's why globalization is the first reason for other country to make war for that. You know, the first of them was United States, and who tried to make this term very wide words. And actually, that started. You know, actually, globalization term itself started in the by I think by the first of 19th century. I think something like this by the economists who do that. But the point I'm trying to reach is that you know, change is constant always, and we cannot avoid the change, and that's the same things. And if you cannot change others by peace, you will change them by war. That is the simple way, I think. So Kilash is very related to the globalization, and it is, you know, again, it's coming back as to how international organizations play a big role to affect the decision making of international policy of the countries. I'm working with a military company, and we know, you know, when there is something happening or going to be happening, we are conducting meeting with very people in high position, and don't want to involve in that actually. But my point is, in order to avoid the clash, we have to know how to start the war. I think that's a very important question.
Well, yeah, you raised very important, you all raised very important points, so thank you very much for that. It is true that if we have a look at major literature, international relations literature on globalization, we see, of course, there's a lot of investigations on how globalization produce implications on the economy, but at the same time also on global politics, because on the one hand, we see that globalization is able to put states in crisis. So states, nation states in particular, they will start suffering. So you all mentioned problems of identity or sovereignty and so on. But at the same time, we see nation states don't disappear. They will never disappear. But of course, they will be forced to change and to adapt to globalization. So, for example, this is a list of implications which are listed into the Samuel Huntington paper. I've also provided a short, let's say, a summary of my lecture with a reading list, which may be helpful for you. And so if you would be interested in reading this paper, which was actually, it started like journal articles and then it became a book, you see that civilization and globalizations are a challenge to states. Because identities will grow, and also the Western world will be forced to change completely. But at the same time, we see some innovative process of integration. So this is the last point I would like to see with you, and this is what I was telling you before, the cleavages. So the European Union. So the European, if we look, and we can end with the European Union, and I very much look forward to knowing your opinions on the European Union, because the European Union, if you look at the European Union, right now you see Brexit, you see populism, you see closeness towards migrants, particularly in Italy. I'm afraid we have populist party, the League, which is quite popular, not it's populist and I'm afraid popular in electoral terms. We see very, very hard attempts to have a unique solution to the COVID-19 and unique solution to vaccination. So we see many problems. So it's difficult to believe that this is the same European Union which was created in 1994 with these principles on the ground. So just to be able to strengthen security in on the neighborhood. So the concept of neighborhood. So I understand that you are coming from countries which are neighbors of the European Union. So this concept has been absolutely important for the EU, because the principle was we need to have good neighbors. And we need to help our neighbors to be stronger, to be more democratic, to be safer. So the point is to be able to bring all these stuff abroad, so democracy, rule of law, human rights, and so on, and with these priorities in mind, which is the last document, the European Union Global Strategy. The first one was issued after September 11 as a response to the coalition of the willing created by the American President George Bush Jr. in that period for those people ready to go.
Bush who occupied Iraq, yes.
Yeah, but I was referring to the document. So the document had to be issued.
So, do you think the invasion to Iraq was actually because of peacemaking, or because of nuclear weapons, or because of catching the oil of this country?
Well, yes, we talk in academic terms, and if we talk in academic terms, we see that, first of all, that was an attempt to fight against terrorism. Then, of course, we see many other reasons behind that strategy. So catching the oil can be one of them, but another one would be to restore the American leadership in the area, and many, many others, of course. But what I was telling you, I was not exactly talking about to steal the oil. Yes, of course, this is one of the answers, let's say. Nobody can say that's correct in international relations. This is not it's hard to find the real truth in these studies. But what I was referring to was the fact that in 2004, the European Union issued its first European Union strategy, security strategy. And after 2004, the next one was issued in 4 years ago, in June 2016, and was called the European Union Global Strategy. And I would like to draw your attention towards the list of priorities that the list is here. So nothing particularly changed in these years. Because you see that as for the European Union, the main priority is still to have good neighbors to east, to south. So of course, several countries are included, which means the Southern Caucasus, Central Asia, Ukraine, the Baltic states, which are now members of the European Union, MENA region, MENA countries, and so on. So all these countries are the neighbors. And then you see an integrated approach to conflicts because you know that the EU has both civilian and military missions. So the civilian military approach, which is the one I'm reading your messages in the chat. I'm reading. And then, of course, in the end, if you read this document, which you can very easily, if you haven't read yet, you can easily Google and you will find the document and you can read it. So at the very end, you find that the last priority is to create, to strengthen this global governance for the 21st century, which means being able to cooperate with a variety of actors, including states like Russia, China, Turkey, Iran, US, and so on. So that's my last point. I would like to know what's your opinion on that, on the Europe, on the security that the European Union would like to bring outside. And also, let me see, Oscar, is your name, Oscar? If you
Yes.
want, Oscar? Okay,
Okay.
Are you Turkish?
No, I'm from Mexico.
Oh, Mexico. Oh, I thought this is a Turkish name, sorry. Okay,
No,
so
actually, my name is from Kazakhstan. My grandpa was from Kazakhstan.
Okay, so can you please elaborate a little bit more your answer here, what you're written in the chat, fighting terrorism is a false, the war on drugs? So you're
Yes, of
putting
course.
together two big milestones of the US security.
Okay, I will put the example of the war on drugs, because I am Mexican. I live in the state of Michoacan. Right now, the CGN cartel is fighting a few hours of my town. And it's so false because the DAA sent these drugs to the United States and don't make anything. It's a lie. It's a lie. The United States took the money in the 80s to fight the Contras in Central America.
Mm-hmm.
The money from the drugs. And at the same time, the president of the United States are actually saying that he was fighting the drugs. And it's not true. What happened right now with the terrorists? Who are actually terrorists? The first one were actually members of Afghanistan fighting the Soviet Union. And they are not terrorists, they are patriots in that time. When the United States go to Afghanistan, they become terrorists. It's just a biggest lie from the United States. Well, we see the example of Syria. Syria, at the beginning of the war in the 2010, was terrorist. Now, when the regiment are actually winning the war, they are not terrorists. Nobody can say who is terrorist. What happened with ISIS? ISIS was actually a brand of Al-Qaeda training by the CIA for the United States. And what happened? They become terrorists because we have no explanation. What happened?
No, they started only after the invasion of Iraq. Before the invasion of Iraq, there was no ISIS, right or wrong?
Yes,
you only heard about ISIS after the invasion of Iraq.
And what's for the United States? It's a lie. The terrorists don't exist. Why we don't hear any time about Christian terrorists? They don't exist because United States is Christian and the European Union is all of them Christian, and we don't have Christian terrorists. The Ku Klux Klan is still now and still killing people, and we don't hear about them. That's true. That's a fact. The war on terrorism and the war on drugs only work for the interest of the European Union and the United States.
I'm impressed, Oscar, that you understand the scenario and you're not affected by the media or the Fox News, or you got the old pictures clear, not like most of people.
Well, bro, I live in a place that actually have a war. You see in last video, I actually have guns in my home. I just about my side, I have my bell because we have a lot of problems here in Mexico. And the president say we don't have cartels, and yes, we have. And they say United States is no longer sending us weapons, and that's the principal reason of the war on drugs. The money for the business of the guns in the United States. Here in Mexico, we need a lot of guns. The cartels, we need a lot of guns, and they have money and send to the United States. And what happened? 2 months ago, the Mexican drug cartels actually sent submarines to the European Union with coke. And the European Union say that have a great marines and a very secure zone. And no, how is possible that cartels send submarines, narco submarines, to the European people, and the European people don't know about it? And 20 years of war with the Soviet Union and don't catch the drugs in the sea? It's not possible. It's a lie. It's a lie. The war on terrorists, the war on drugs, it's a lie. Just work for destroy small countries and steal their resources. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, of course, this is a possible explanation. There are several explanations which may be, of course, sustained. What I would like to stress is the fact that when it comes to security, what is important is the perception of security that we have, so the perception of the threats, because threats may be, as Oscar was saying, may be also manipulated, and they be constructed, and they may be created in a way that are more or less visible, depending on what's the purpose of the entire process. But for sure, on the kind of security threats, the response policies are shaped on the perception of security threats. So the fact that
but security threats can be taken as an excuse. For example, yes, like for example, the reason for invading Iraq was under a security issue that the Iraq has a nuclear weapon. Okay, if Iraq has a nuclear weapon as a threat, Israel also has a nuclear weapon. So why it's not a threat? Why do you have to invade a country and kill the president, execute the president of this country, because you have a doubt that he has a nuclear weapon? And on the other side, there are other countries who have nuclear weapons, and you didn't invade these countries. So it's just an excuse to invade a country and steal it. And it was not justified. And they didn't find any nuclear weapon in Iraq. It was not found that that Iraq has any nuclear weapon. So it was a lie. It was an excuse under the reason of security threat. Okay, so if this is the case, if this country has a threat because it has a nuclear weapon, what about Israel? Israel also has a nuclear weapon. Why don't you calculate Israel as a threat also?
Because it depends on
No, how Israel can be threat? I don't understand. Israel, it's a peaceful country on the world. How it can be a threat? So it's something very strange. And also, Israel don't have a nuclear weapon at all.
No, Israel have a nuclear weapon. You are not living in the world, or what, Muhammad? Of course, they have a nuclear weapon.
I don't understand. No. This is not true at all. It's not true.
And what do you say about this? How can you say that Israel is a peaceful country? I don't understand how you can say something like that.
Dear friends, I suggest that time of our class will be over soon. So maybe it's time to stop our discussion. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, just let me add that it was a great pleasure to have this class to you and to meet you. So as you can see, the topic I teach, I regularly bring discussions in the classroom, because the topics are absolutely intriguing and interesting. So I really hope that this discussion has been useful and fruitful to you, and that all the materials I've shared with you and all the things I have told you also can be useful for your future knowledge. And also feel free to contact me if you like, because you will see my email address in the PowerPoint I shared. So feel free to contact me. I will be available anytime. Once again, thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me and for having my presentation here. It was really enjoyable, and I really hope that this will be just the first chance for further cooperation between our universities. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Danielle. It was a really great lecture, so thank you again.
Sorry. Hello. No, I just wanted to ask the professor to tell us a bit more about herself, about what she does, her university, and so on.
Oh yeah, sure. Let me just type here so you can find more things about myself here. So this is my website, but I can tell you that I'm an associate professor of international relations and global civil society at the University of Catania in Italy, in the south of Italy. And I'm also visiting professor of political violence and terrorism at the OSCE Academy in Bishkek. So regularly teach political violence and terrorism in Central Asia. And I'm right now the president of the European Peace Research Association and the chair of the ACPR Standing Group on International Relations. So I'm also in my own department. I'm the Erasmus coordinator and deputy director for internationalization and research. So this is why I've been in touch with Katerina for establishing more research, but I'm basically an international relations scholar, and so I'm involved in many research projects, but I also love teaching to international classes of students, and I'm always ready to work with other colleagues and other students. But more information can be found, if you like, in my own website. And maybe
I have reviewed
Yes.
the profile just now, and I saw that you have developed a game for peacemaking. I see. That means you did work with the simulation. Is right?
Sorry?
I see. I saw that you work with the simulations in the peacemaking games. Is that right?
Yeah, right. This is a simulation game I have developed. This is my own simulation game. And it is called the Game of Peace. But maybe if you were mentioning Eurasia, within the Eurasia project, I have created an online course on international relations, which is absolutely free to follow. You just enroll and you follow this course if you are interested. And it's basic international relations. And after completion, you can also
Are you a Spanish doctor or Italian?
Italian.
Italian, okay.
All right.
So thanks again, Daniela, on behalf of Samara National Research University. It was a really fruitful lecture. Thank you again, and see you probably soon. Goodbye.
I really hope. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Grazie.
Grazie. Or maybe
Goodbye.
spasiba.
Спасибо.
Да, спасибо.
Спасибо вам.
Спасибо.